I'm Julia Cameron, and I made this interactive abridgment of my book, The Artist's Way, with a circle of friends. We worked high up in the Rocky Mountains in a beautiful space called Star House. We spent a day together, along with the magpies, the hawks, the crows, reading from the book, talking to each other, listening, questioning. I was occasionally found singing. And out of this day we have boiled down a distillate. We've chosen the things which felt the most important to us. The Artist's Way is a collective experience, and for this reason our book on tape is a little bit different from some of the others that you may have heard. We hope you love it. When people ask me what I do, I usually answer, I'm a writer-director, and I teach these creativity workshops, and the last part is what interests them. How can you teach creativity? They want to know. I tell them, I can't. I teach people to let themselves be creative. I've taught artists and non-artists and filmmakers and lawyers and people from many different stripes and walks of life. And what I have learned in this teaching is that each of us is profoundly creative and far more creative than we know. I have seen blocks dissolved and lives transformed by the simple process of engaging the great Creator in discovering and recovering our creative powers. The great Creator? That sounds like some Native American god. That sounds too Christian, too New Age, too stupid, simple-minded, threatening. I know. Think of it as an exercise in open-mindedness. Because the Artist's Way is in essence a spiritual path initiated and practiced through creativity, you will hear the word God. This may be volatile for some of you, conjuring old unworkable ideas. Please be open-minded and do not let semantics be a block. When the word God is used, substitute the thought good orderly direction. The point isn't what you name it. What we are talking about is creative energy. God is a useful shorthand for some of us, but so is goddess, mind, universe, mother, higher power, source. The point again is not what you name it, it's that you try using it. For many of us, thinking of it as a form of spiritual electricity is a useful jumping off point. Please remember, no matter what your age or your life path, whether making art is your career or your hobby or your dream, it's not too late or too egotistical or too silly to start to work on your creativity. Through my own experience and that of countless others that I've shared, I have come to know that creativity is our true nature and that blocks are an unnatural thwarting of a process that is at once as normal and as miraculous as the blossoming of a flower at the end of a slender green stem. In a sense, your creativity is like your blood. Just as blood is a fact of your physical body and nothing you invented, creativity is a fact of your spiritual body and nothing that you must invent. I began teaching creativity workshops in New York. One minute I was walking in the West Village on a beautiful street in beautiful afternoon light, and the next minute I heard what I call my marching orders. I was to teach people how to unblock. Those are the lessons that we'll be working with today. Where did the lessons come from? In January of 1978, I stopped drinking. I had never thought drinking made me a writer, but now I suddenly thought not drinking might make me stop. In my mind, drinking and writing went together like scotch and soda. I needed to find a way to work sober or give up creativity entirely. I learned to turn my creativity over to the only God I could believe in, the God of creativity, the force that through the green fuse drives the flower, as Dylan Thomas says. I learned to get out of the way and let that creative force work through me. In retrospect, I am astounded that I could let go of the drama of being a suffering artist. Nothing dies harder than a bad idea, and very few ideas are worse than the ones we have about art. We all know how broke, crazy, promiscuous, unreliable, drunk artists are. And if we aren't, then what's my excuse? The Artist's Way began as informal class notes mandated by my partner, Mark Bryan. Write it down, he said. It should be a book. It could help a lot of people. I began formally to assemble my notes. The packets expanded. The number of students expanded. I put on the page what I had already been putting into practice then for about a decade. The resulting pages emerged as a blueprint for do-it-yourself recovery. Like mouth-to-mouth resuscitation or the Heimlich maneuver, the tools are intended as lifesavers. Please use them. Please pass them on. There are two basic tools in creative recovery, the morning pages and the artist date. In order for you to have a lasting creative recovery, you need to use both of them. Morning pages. A, they have to be done in the morning. Put simply, morning pages are 3 pages of longhand morning writing about absolutely anything. There's no wrong way to do morning pages. They are not meant to be real writing. They are not meant to be art. Although occasionally you will get an idea in your morning pages that will end up evolving into a piece of work. Pages are meant to be simply the act of moving the hand across the page. They don't have to sound smart. Sometimes they do. A lot of times they sound whiny, negative, grumpy, petty. I used to call them brain drain. They siphon off the negativity that stands between us and our day. Nobody's allowed to read morning pages except for you. Rule of thumb, don't even read them yourself for 8 or 9 weeks. Write 3 pages, stick them into an envelope, or do it in a spiral notebook, and don't leaf back through. Just write 3 pages of anything. The morning pages are the primary tool of creative recovery. As blocked artists, we tend to criticize ourselves mercilessly. We are victims of our own internalized perfectionist, a nasty internal and eternal critic, the censor, who resides in our brain and keeps up a constant stream of subversive remarks that are often disguised as the truth. The censor says wonderful things like, "You call that writing? How can you be a writer? You can't even punctuate. You can't even spell." Could I hear anything that some of your censors say? What do you get? Does anybody have one? Go.
Engineers can't paint.
Engineers can't paint. I didn't know that, but your censor does. Tom?
You'll never be able to do this good enough.
You'll never be able to do this good enough.
A lot of people have written this already, so why do I need to write it again?
A lot of people have written this already, so why do I need to write it again? Because we need to hear it again. You know, we spend so much time wishing to be original, and the root word of original is origin, and we are the origin. Because there's no wrong way to write the morning pages, the censor's opinion of your pages doesn't count. Let your censor rattle on, and it will. Keep your hand moving across the page. Note how it loves to aim for your creative jugular. Every time you get smarter, so does it. The point is to stop taking the censor as the voice of reason and learn to hear it for the blocking device that it is. Morning pages will help you to do this. Because your censor is chatting and you keep on writing them, you are training yourself to move past your censor. You are miniaturizing your censor. What this means is that you will be more and more able to move into any area of risk because you are learning to walk past that gateway figure. Morning pages are non-negotiable. In other words, yes, they must be done. Sometimes people will say to me, well, I've read your whole book and I've done everything but the morning pages. And to me, that's a little bit like reading lots of travel books and never getting to go. You get something of the experience of maybe what other people's creative recoveries looked like, but you really need to let your fingers do the walking and do morning pages. When people ask me, why do we do these? I usually joke and I say, to get to the other side. And morning pages do get you to the other side. They get you to the part where you can hear your quiet center. You can hear the still small voice. It does get louder if we listen. I think it may be useful for some of you to think of morning pages as a meditation practice. Often as Westerners, we have a very hard time with sitting meditation. This is a way to meditate and be busy at the same time. You'll like it. It's impossible to write morning pages for any extended period of time without coming into contact with an unexpected inner power. Anybody who faithfully writes morning pages will be led to a connection with a source of wisdom within. I think we need to listen. One of the things that is a cue for me is very often when I say something true or think something important, I'll have a crow fly by my window. So we just got the big bird okaying. Anyone who faithfully writes morning pages will be led to a connection with the source of wisdom within. When I am stuck in a painful situation or a problem that I do not think I know how to handle, I go to the pages and I ask. And then I will listen for the guidance. And it usually sounds wiser than something I think of for myself. So I ask people to experiment with that technique. The other basic tool of the artist's way, other than the morning pages, is the artist date. And it strikes many people as a non-tool, a diversion. If Mark and I are teaching a 12-week course, everybody starts doing morning pages 7 out of 7 days within a few weeks. Or, people maybe do 5 out of 7, but generally morning pages are something that people sort of leap up and salute because it's work. The thing that is difficult to do is an artist date. Think of the combination of the two tools as a radio receiver and transmitter. It's a two-directional process, out and then in. Doing your morning pages, the work, right? You are sending, notifying yourself and the universe of your dreams, dissatisfactions, hopes. During your artist date, you are receiving. Now, this is why it's hard to do, okay? Particularly people who are, quote, working on their spiritual evolution. We're terrifically good at service. What we are not so good at is allowing good to come back toward us. This is what you're practicing with an artist date. What is it exactly? An artist date is a block of time about 2 hours weekly, set aside and committed to nurturing your own creative consciousness, your inner artist. In its most primary form, it's an excursion. My personal preference, map stores, clock stores, rug stores, any place where I get a feeling of eternity and the human family working through time. Now, you do not get to take anyone on your artist date but you and your inner artist, aka your inner child. We may be tired of hearing that term, but the part of you which creates is young, is vulnerable, and you need to love it and treat it protectively. Now, if you think an artist date sounds stupid, or that you'll never be able to find the time because of your many responsibilities and commitments, please remember it's your life. Please identify this reaction as resistance. I'm looking at this room and there are at least 3 people in here whom I love, who have worn themselves to an absolute frenzy serving the rest of us. And I believe that to be true of anybody trying to walk into a creative recovery. It is not that we are selfish people. It is that we don't know how to remember ourselves. Another way to think of an artist date is like spending time with a child of a divorce, because all that child really wants is to get to spend time with the parent it's not living with, and it doesn't care if it goes anyplace fancy. It just wants to be listened to and looked at. That's what you're doing when you go on an artist date. And it is scary, and you're not allowed to take anybody else with, and you will be astounded at the degree of sabotage which you can set up for yourself. Spending time in solitude with your artist child is essential to self-nurturing. A long country walk, a solitary expedition to the beach, the forest, the mountain, or maybe your artist would prefer going bowling. Doesn't matter. What matters is that it's sensory and that it helps you to begin to fill the well. Art is an image-using system. One of the great paradoxes of creativity is that it is very mysterious and it is not mysterious at all. That all of us have it, all of us do it, and all of us need to consciously think about how we do it. Art is an image-using system. In order to create, we draw from our inner well. This is an artistic reservoir. Ideally, it's like a well-stocked trout pond. We've got big fish, little fish, fat fish, skinny fish. We have a lot of fish there. As artists, we need to realize that we have to maintain this ecosystem. In other words, if you start fishing from your reservoir in order to do a project, you must consciously replenish your reservoir. A lot of times somebody will begin a big project and it will go marvelously, and then it'll get harder and harder. And they'll go, well, why did it get so hard? Everything was going so well. The answer is, it got hard because everything was going well. In other words, they had just overfished the pond. So what an artist date does is train you to consciously replenish. Everybody gets that? Art is born in attention and its midwife is detail. Art may seem to spring from pain, but I think that's because pain often serves to focus our attention on detail. For example, the excruciatingly beautiful curve of a lost lover's neck. Somebody else, their side over neck. I was in love with a man who had black hair on his arms with just a little red in it. And whenever I think about him, I remember his forearm, and it just brings me back. Art may seem to involve broad strokes and grand schemes and great plans, but it is the attention to detail that stays with us. The singular image is what haunts us and becomes art. When you go on an artist date, you are collecting singular images. Even when you are in the midst of pain, the singular image is what brings delight. And I think any artist who would tell you differently is lying. In order to function in the language of art, we have to learn to live in it comfortably. The language of art is symbol. It's a wordless language, even when our art is chasing it with words. The artist's language is sensual. It's a language of felt experience. When we work at our art, we dip into the well of our experience and we scoop out images. Because we do this, we need to learn how to put the images back. In filling the well, think magic, think delight, think fun. Do not think duty. Do not think, what should I do? Do not do spiritual sit-ups like reading a dull but recommended text. Do what intrigues you, what interests you. Please think about mystery instead of mastery. A mystery can be very simple. If I drive this road and not my usual road, what will I see? Yesterday I was so mesmerized by this deer that I got lost coming down the mountain and ended up practically driving to Utah, but it did fill the well. A mystery can be simpler even than that. A mystery can be scent. If I light this stick of incense, what will I feel? Scent is a pathway that we often overlook. For me, the scent of Christmas at any time of year immediately takes me across the bridge into the imagination. Fresh bread, homemade soup. For some reason, for me, coconut oil. I also love the smell of lilacs. I like to wear lily oil. All of these things for me ground me, center me, and open me to drawing from my artistic well. Some sounds lull us, other sounds stimulate us. In the center of your heart is a still small part, like a meadow in a forest made of green. In the center of your heart is a still small part, and that is where your soul must go to dream. For me, music moves me into the center of my heart. Some sounds stimulate us, some sounds soothe us. Making sounds walks us across the bridge. Listening to sounds moves us across the bridge. Many of us intuitively use sound this way. For me, flute music. You will all find your own music, and hopefully you will all make your own music. 5 minutes of barefoot dancing to drum music can make you refreshed. Filling the well doesn't need to be novelty. Cooking is a wonderful way to fill the well. Any regular, repetitive action will fill the well. My current form of spiritual maintenance is roller skating. It moves me into my body. My body is the body of my experience. My body tells me what my soul knows. So the second tool, the artist's date, is a tool of embodiment. The morning pages acquaint us with what we think and what we think we need. We identify problem areas and concerns. We complain, we enumerate, we identify, we isolate, we fret. Occasionally we dream. This first step is analogous to prayer. The second step, the artist state, is analogous to hearing and listening. When you do your artist states, you begin to hear solutions. When you use those two tools in conjunction, you trigger synchronicity, which I loosely define as the fortuitous intermeshing of events in an inexplicable but noticeable fashion. Now I'm going to give you something which we call rules of the road. In order to be an artist, I must, 1, show up at the page and use the page to rest, to dream, and to try. Fill the well by caring for my artist. Set small and gentle goals and reach them. Pray for guidance, courage, and humility. Remember that it is far harder and more painful to be a blocked artist than it is to do the work. Be alert always for the presence of the great Creator leading and helping my artist. Choose companions who encourage me to do the work, not just talk about doing the work or why I'm not doing the work. Remember that the great Creator loves creativity. Remember that it is my job to do the work, not judge the work. Place this sign in my workplace. Great Creator, I'll take care of the quantity. You take care of the quality. This is week 1, recovering a sense of safety. One of our chief needs as creative beings is support. Unfortunately, this can be hard to come by. Ideally, we would be nurtured and encouraged first by our nuclear family and then by ever-widening circles of friends, teachers, well-wishers. As young artists, we need and want to be acknowledged for our attempts and efforts, as well as for our accomplishments and our triumphs. Unfortunately, many artists never receive this critical early encouragement. As a result, they may not know that they are artists at all. Parents seldom respond, "Try it and see what happens," to artistic urges issuing from their offspring. Instead, they offer cautionary advice. Maybe you could find something more practical. Maybe you need something to fall back on, we are often told. In many families, a career in the arts exists outside of their economic and their social reality. Art won't pay the electric bill, they say. And as a result, if a child wants to consider an artistic career, they are urged to consider it sensibly. As a result, many of these children become what I call shadow artists. Shadow artists are artists who stand in the shadow of a declared artist. They may work for them, they may work with them, they may be married to them. I've done all of that. What a shadow artist does is gain a great deal of satisfaction by being near their dream and serving their dream, but serving it at one remove because they believe that if they bring it into the light, it will disintegrate to the touch. Too intimidated to become artists themselves, and very low often in self-worth, so that they don't even recognize that they are artists. They, in effect, hide their light not only from themselves, but from the world, or vice versa. I want to say that artists love other artists, and that shadow artists are gravitating toward their rightful place, and that those of us who have been shadow artists are moving toward our dream and not yet able to claim it. And so we need to acknowledge this without getting too discouraged. As a rule of thumb, shadow artists judge themselves very harshly. And they tend to believe that if they just had more character, then they would be doing their dream. What they don't often see and what we don't often see is that the reason we don't move into the dream is that we believe and we are taught that it belongs only to an elite few. This isn't true. In order to move from the realm of shadows into the light of creativity, shadow artists must learn to take themselves more seriously. With gentle, deliberate effort, they must nurture their artist child. Creativity is play, but for shadow artists, play is a very serious business. Learning to let yourself create is like learning to walk, and your artist child must begin by baby steps. Judging your early artistic efforts is artist abuse, and most of us do it. And the way that we do it is that we write a first song and we play it to someone enormously accomplished, and they say something like, "Well, do you hear your chords at exactly the same time as you hear your melody lines? And are you able to do notation?" And what happens is that your excitement shrinks back down and you become ashamed. When we think about making a film, most of us haven't had the chance to see an early Lucas film or Scorsese film or Coppola film. So we make our small film and compare it to the Godfather trilogy and wonder why we feel a little bit foolish. Okay? All artists do begin with baby steps, but our mythology tells us something different. In recovering from our creative blocks, it's necessary to go gently and slowly, because what we are after is healing our blocks and not the creation of new ones. So again, the object is for us not to frighten ourselves. The object is to be very gentle. Creative recovery is like marathon running. The sanest rule of thumb around long-distance running is that you are to run 10 slow miles for every 1 fast mile. And the same thing is true of creative recovery. You need to remember that there are many times when you won't look good to yourself or to anyone else, and so you must be careful with your companions. And since your most intimate companion is yourself, you need to be careful, as my girlfriend Juliana McCarthy, the actress, says, don't pick up the first doubt. In other words, as you are walking out of the acting class that you took for the first time, where it was exciting when you were in there, but you walk out and the head starts going, you've made a total fool out of yourself now, just say thank you for sharing and try not to listen. Often when I am teaching, I am asked, do you realize how old I'm going to be before I learn how to do, let us say, play the piano? And the real answer to that is, you will be the same age you will be if you don't learn how to play the piano. So we need to set aside age as a block that we believe in. Negative beliefs are exactly that. They're beliefs and they're not facts. For example, the world was never flat, even though all of us believed that it was at one point. And you are not dumb or crazy or egomaniacal or silly, even if you temporarily believe yourself to be. And very often, when you move toward your creativity, those are the beliefs that come forward. Okay? They're core negative or false beliefs. Negative beliefs say artists are drunk, crazy, broke, irresponsible, loners, promiscuous, doomed, unhappy, and born instead of made. The positive alternatives are artists can be sober, sane, solvent, responsible, user-friendly, faithful, saved, happy, discovered, and recovered, and P.S. have good relationships. This is what we don't often say. We have a lot of thinking that tells us that artists are tortured, and we don't get very many reality checks which say when you practice your creativity, you in fact become more happy. Most of the time, blocked creatives carry unacknowledged either-or reasoning that stands between them and their work. To become unblocked, we have to recognize our either-or thinking. And our either-or thinking goes, I can either be financially successful or an artist. The other big one that we get is I can either be an artist or romantically fulfilled. We make speeches to ourselves and to other willing victims. I could do that better if only, we say. And we probably could, but the if only is if only we would let ourselves do it. Affirmations will help you be able to do it. An affirmation is a positive statement of positive belief. And if we were able to become 1/10 as good at positive self-talk as we are at negative self-talk, we would notice an enormous change. But when you try saying nice things about yourself, you can find it is very difficult to do. I have been practicing saying, I, Julia, am lovable. This is very difficult. I am lying in my bed alone, staring at the ceiling, going, I, Julia, am lovable. And it is immediately crowded with experiences that seem to show something else. When you work with an affirmation, it works like running water through a rusty pipe. What happens is that the negative beliefs that you have that impede the positive belief get pushed forward, and that's what you first see. Censors loathe anything that sounds like genuine self-worth. They immediately start up the imposter routine. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? It's as if our entire collective unconscious stayed up all night watching Cruella de Vil. Do you remember Cruella de Vil? Cruella de Vil, Cruella de Vil, she doesn't get you, some evil thing will. And when I was little, she was the scariest villain that I knew. Very often, when we're walking into our self-worth, at least for me, Cruella de Vil shows up. So try picking an affirmation. For example, I am a brilliant and prolific potter or painter. Write it 10 times in a row, or even say it 10 times in a row. And what you will hear is what I call a blurt. Your censor starts to object. Listen very carefully to your specific objections, and if you have a chance to, write them down, because they are your particular personal code. In the same way that the cultural code was just that we collectively tend to believe that artists will be broke and crazy and drunk and self-destructive. Mark Bryan, my longtime teaching partner, also ex-husband and friend, calls it the Edgar Allan Poe school, that artists are the ones who get drunk and die broke in the gutter. And we do tend to believe this collectively, but on a personal level, whatever you had happen in your own family or in your own schooling will sort of customize and personalize your censor. So, you know, I got the wicked stepmother. That's my particular form of the censor. Some of the rest of you may have another form, but as you begin to move into your self-worth, it will show up. You will be amazed at the rotten things your subconscious will find to say to you. They hold the key to your freedom in their claws. Because when you get these dragged up out of the murk into the light, you can begin to work with them consciously. I want to tell one other story. About 10 years ago, I was teaching, and we started working with this, and a man wrote, "I am a brilliant and prolific writer," and his self-abusive blurts were absolutely horrifying. So I asked him to travel back in his life, what I call his narrative timeline, and see if he could figure out where the belief came from, that if he said, "I'm a brilliant and prolific writer," things were terribly wrong and he was awful. And it turned out that as a young man in college, he had been encouraged by a teacher who had then made passes at him. And then after that, the teacher accused him of a lot of other things, being ambitious, sidling up to him, etc., etc., etc. And this meant that whenever this man tried to own his dream of being a writer, everything that teacher said to him came back to him. And this is the kind of thing that happens for a lot of us. We hear, "Who do you think you are?" I'm going to read some affirmations. I'm a channel for God's creativity and my work comes to good. My dreams come from God and God has the power to accomplish them. As I create and listen, I will be led. Creativity is the Creator's will for me. I'm allowed to nurture my artist. My creativity heals myself and others. Through the use of a few simple tools, my creativity will flourish. Through the use of my creativity, I serve God. My creativity always leads me to truth and to love. My creativity leads me to forgiveness and self-forgiveness. There is a divine plan of goodness for me, and there is a divine plan of goodness for my work. As I listen to the Creator within, I am led. As I listen to my creativity, I am led to my Creator. I am willing to create. I'm willing to learn to let myself create. I'm willing to let God create through me. I'm willing to experience my creative energy. I'm willing to use my creative talents. How did those feel? One of the things that is incredibly beneficial is to get one of those cheap little tape recorders, or a good one if you want, but any of them will work, and use the list of affirmations, or pick positive ones of your own, record them in your own voice, play them on your Walkman, play them in your car. It's very potent to hear it told to you in your own voice.